covered with you to death fast. Okay, the recording's only starting now. No problem. So, yeah, design principles, then mostly some housekeeping that we need to do. We'll look at some older portfolios once again, and we'll probably wrap up a bit early today. Next week, we have a guest speaker again. With a lot of the aspects or the design aspects of the portfolio and the portfolio structure itself, I think we're going to sort of eradicate past issues that we had with font usage, texture use, just colors in general, timing of elements, and so on. Speaker volume. Huh. I can certainly try. I haven't changed it, I think, ever, so it should be fine. Right. Cool. Glad it's working for you. Okay, but let me go ahead and let's run through it. We can make it a bit of a discussion. There's some new templates for 3D animation and game design students. Motion Design's been using templates for their portfolio presentation for quite some time. The only drawback, I think, from using the template is that game design students and animation students might not be familiar with motion. Sorry, not motion, but After Effects itself. You can, of course, you should all have licenses to After Effects though, and you can, of course, go and export all the title pages as images or PSDs if you want to, and drop them into your editor of choice. But I'm going to run through After Effects because it's already set up like that, and it makes it simpler. And I'm sure Motion Design is going through this process with Jan in any case, but we decided to just standardize on something. There are, however, some outlying cases where the template might not cover everything that you need to present, and then you need to kind of generate your own content. But for most part, the major content is laid out according to its deliverables and its assessment outcomes per term, and also per module, and then per major term. But I'll run you through that in a minute. Right, so I'm just going to go ahead and share my application. Okay. Cool. So I did get a request for a brief for the term as well. Everything that you would require is on Canvas. There's no specific deliverables for the media aesthetics. Like we said before, everything needs to kind of spawn from the major. The only one that is a little bit outside of your regular submission requirements is the interactive content component, or immersive content component, sorry. So that 360 experiment, that just needs to also be included in your portfolios, please. We'd like to see an update on that. It will, obviously, the submission would be different than before, because before you submitted any working files or anything like that for the portfolios. But I'll make sure that I create a reminder for that, and also remind your major lecturers to include that in their portfolio descriptions. That's the only outlier. For most of the subjects in animation arts, you would require a showreel in any case, and a portfolio that matches the structure of the course. Okay. Also, if there's anything that you missed, the classes are being recorded and then uploaded. I think that's the case throughout. Maybe the icons aren't all that consistent. Sorry about that. But for most part, the links are provided afterwards. We had a discussion with Paulo last week. Next week, we're chatting to Wagner Berger from Albino, motion design or motion graphics studio nearby, and tell us a bit about his processes. And today, we just need to go through the templates. We can go through some examples. And again, like I said, a lot of the design principles that we need to consider when we're creating these sort of presentations are managed by having a template in place, but we can also explain why that template exists, what is good and what's, like what are we losing from having a template. And then just discussing do's and don'ts of your portfolio presentation. Like I said, I don't expect it to take the entire 2 hours. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so first off, let's recap on just the design principles. This is a little summary produced by Canva. Canva, I think, is an online design tool similar to Figma, if I'm not mistaken. And they also produce, of course, their own templates and things, as pretty much any slideshow produces its own templates nowadays. Like Google Slides has templates, and Figma would probably have templates for slides, and whatever you use. Most of these have templates to go on. So use of templates is not something foreign. Everyone's going to do it, and if you're not good at design, maybe a template's a good place to start. Of course, design principles can be applied, and you can kind of design your own templates, just not for your portfolio presentation or this particular presentation. And I'll show you why. Okay, so let's kick off with this. Hope the streaming's okay. I don't think the movement of it is that important, or the frame rate, just as long as we sort of covered our bases here. I'm going to switch off my camera to unmute. Just let me know in the chat if there's anything wrong with the presentation. I do still sometimes run into some technical glitches. Quick check-in. Did you get audio from that?
No sound.
Nope.
Okay. I'm going to try and share tab instead.
Lines, shapes, form, text, and color are basic design elements.
but how do we bring them together? In this lesson, we introduce key design principles so you can create with confidence. What's the first thing you see in any design? We'll give you a hint. It's the element that's emphasized. Emphasis is when one element stands out. It may be bigger, bolder, or brighter than anything around it. We add emphasis to the parts of our design we'd like people to notice first. Contrast, movement, and white space are some techniques that create emphasis. Let's run through these one by one. At its most basic level, contrast is difference. It's the difference between red and blue, patterned and plain, big and small. Contrasting elements are opposite elements. They make designs interesting and is used to add emphasis. Color, texture, and lines are a few elements that help us to build contrast. We contrast dark with light colors or thick with thin lines. Here, we can see many examples of contrast in a single image. The text Mingbao Restaurant is the most important piece of information. That's why it pops with bold and bright type. This contrasts with the black background to emphasize the text. Where else do you see contrast? How about the white ring surrounding the black circle? Or the white lines framing the dark pictures? The photographs provide further contrast through texture. The tactile 3D detail of seeds on a burger bun, or steam rising from a hot dish, also contrasts with the plain black circle. White space applies to any area of design not taken up by other elements, such as text, photos, or illustrations. Designers love it because it can help create grouping, add emphasis, and improve legibility. Contrary to the name, white space doesn't just apply to the color white. Even if our design is blue or yellow, we can still have white space. It often refers to the background of the design. Even with a picture in the background, you could still have the benefits of white space. What we're looking for is an empty patch that gives our design breathing space. We use white space to prevent our page becoming overcrowded with elements. It makes our design easier to look at. White space also helps with emphasis. In this picture, there's so much white space, we're instantly drawn towards the words. The information is delivered quickly thanks to white space. There's plenty of movement in a still image. Movement is the way our eyes scan the page. It's how we follow one element to the next. Line and color direct us towards certain parts of the design in a certain order. In this book cover, simple shapes and contrasting colors direct our eyes to the center. Then, we notice a semicircle in the corner, which represents the sun. Doesn't it look like the sun is poised to move across the square, or maybe out of it altogether? There are many ways to achieve movement. Through contrasting white on black, our eyes are first drawn to the title of the classic book cover. Then we make our way down the page to spot the shark lurking beneath. The empty space prompts our eyes to move between these bold elements. Only later do we drift back up to take a closer look at the little object. Will the swimmer make her escape before the shark moves into her space? Repetition can bring artistry to our design. It can make our design look consistent, build a pattern, or emphasize our message. Let's start with patterns. If we take a watermelon and repeat this object until it covers the page, we've made a pattern. This pattern can add texture or provide a background. Repeating text will keep our design minimal. This means we can focus on the message, using subtler elements such as color and space to give the words their meaning. Repetition also gives our design a sense of rhythm. In the same way music gives us a predictable beat, repetition gives us a visual beat. Using elements in a repeated order gives our design a clean and well-structured look. If something is out of proportion, it might fall over. That's how we think about the size and quantity of our elements and how they relate to each other. This stops our design feeling heavy, lopsided, or generally off. When creating a design that features a cup of tea, a spoon, and a book, we need to make sure the cup is bigger than the spoon, and the book should be the biggest object of all. No matter how many objects or elements we use, they should always be proportionate. Once we have our objects or elements in proportion, it's time to look at how they're balanced. Balance is how we position objects inside our design. It can also include the amount of white space compared to other design elements. One way to master balance is to think of each element as having a weight. From text boxes to images to blocks of color, consider each of their sizes, shapes, and what weight they have in relation to other elements on the page. We can also balance our elements symmetrically or asymmetrically. Symmetrical balance gives our design a sense of security. Our viewer feels safe knowing our design has been well structured and everything looks like it's in the right place. It's safe, but can also be a bit boring. Asymmetrical balance is where elements are not balanced in exactly the same way. For instance, one side of the composition might have a large emphasized element that is balanced by a couple of lesser elements on the other side. It's still balanced, but it's not mirrored, like in the symmetrical example. This makes it a little more dynamic and interesting. Unbalanced design can be its own design technique too. For example, when we want to make our viewer feel like something isn't quite right, we make our design look unsteady on purpose. This is great for unnerving the viewer, like on a horror movie poster. Balance is one of the most important principles. The final principle to discuss is alignment. Some people suggest alignment pairs with balance, as by aligning elements, it can help designs feel more balanced. Alignment focuses on the relationships between elements, giving structure and order to designs. You can have edge or center alignment. Edge alignment can see objects relating to the left, right, top, or bottom of the page. Center alignment sees objects sticking to the middle, either horizontally or vertically, or both, if you want it right in the middle of both X and Y axes. Objects can also be aligned to each other, where they both sit on the same X or Y axis. This implies these objects have a relationship to each other and therefore should be understood together. Alignment is incredibly important if you want your design work to feel professional and finished. Having objects that are not aligned to each other makes your design look random and unplanned. We've learned a number of design principles in this lesson. Soon it will become second nature as you work them into your own designs. But until then, we'll give you a reminder of the theory you've learned today. Emphasis is the way one element stands out on the page. Contrast is the difference between two or more elements, such as bright and dark colors or big and small objects. White space prevents our page becoming overcrowded with elements. It's the breathing space on the page, and it can be any color. Movement is the way our eyes are directed to scan from one element to the next. Repetition can bring patterns or rhythms into our designs. Proportion is the size or quantity of our design elements in relation to each other. Balance is how we position those multiple objects and how we can make the overall design symmetrical or asymmetrical. Alignment is building relationships between objects and the X and Y axis. Test out each principle in your next design, even if you're only using one word on a background.
All good? Got sound? It was working? I believe it was.
All good.
All good. Okay, cool. Okay, so back to principles of visual perception. I think the design principles we've obviously covered to death, like I said in the past. It's good to be reminded, though, every now and then before you tackle any design task, because we often sort of get so caught up in the technical aspects of the work that we do that we forget that we need to present it in the end of the day and that people need to look at it and appreciate it for what it is. And so many times, and also in the examples that I'm going to show you, we've noticed that the fact that the work needs to be presented becomes a hurdle for the students and becomes detrimental to the outcome of the portfolio because it's overlooked and it's not really being considered, and then gets put together sort of at a late stage, or just making very strange design choices. And I can understand, because it's probably late in the year and you've like rushed to get all your projects out in time. By the time that you're putting your portfolio together, it might be last minute, and then things just don't gel well. So the portfolio templates, for those of you that aren't familiar with them, are very basic, clean, structured templates that really give way to the work that you've produced, so that the actual work can be appreciated and the template, for most part, can be ignored. Well, when assessing and when reviewing the work. So the folder over there goes to portfolio templates. These are all After Effects files. This is, by the way, the motion design portfolio. One is the one that Jan supplied earlier in the year. I think it said June template. I haven't updated or changed that in any way. So for the motion design students, you're still welcome to use those. And then also you might just be way more familiar with the inner workings of After Effects. So do excuse me if I bore you for a minute, but I think there might be some things that's sort of worth looking at. Okay, this just reminded me that I can't actually carry on doing it this way. So switch over to, it's just easier to do this. Okay. So if you open any of those templates, let's start with 3D animation, just quick. So the way that it's set up is there's a title card in the beginning that is a pre-comp. I think I might have deleted some of the instructional layers. I'm sorry if I've done that. So it might look a little bit different from the motion design template. Essentially, though, we have a placeholder element. So this project placeholder that surfaces every now and then, that'll allow you to bring in your own footage and replace this content with that. A neat trick for replacing footage in the same space is just holding down Alt and dragging it from your library. I don't have any actual footage in here, so if we can maybe just, I don't know, just grab some random stuff from the desktop here. I did see another clip here just now. Some of your work. I think there's something in downloads as well, or desktop rather. Movies. Sorry, this is irrelevant. I'll grab a few things. Okay, so if you did want to replace a project within that segment, you'll see that we're applying all the sort of principles of design to this template in the first place by keeping things consistent. So there's repetition, there's color used for areas that require contrast and emphasis. It's sort of minimalistic, so it doesn't interfere. It's not entirely centered, so it's off center. It creates a good balance, I think, in general. It is really minimal, and it's somewhat color coded to represent the modules, or the differentiation between the modules and the major. And then there's also a component in the end for additional work and your showreel. You'll notice that the additional work has to be something that you've produced within the year of your end-year portfolio. So exit level year can't be done, like you can't get credit for content that you've produced before that. Although the showreel simply says 2023, but actually can be anything that you've produced at any point in time. This is just seen as your latest showreel then. The text elements can obviously be changed because they're not locked to anything at this point. But you would, I think this is the minimum requirements at least, because there's a per term and per assessment criteria title. So for, let's say, 3D animation students that had visual development, they would have needed to produce mood boards at some point. And then your mood boards will obviously be the next thing in line that you're showcasing. So match your work with the titles that are ahead of it. If for some reason you didn't have the modules in that year, I think it would still make sense to present it as part of the major, even if they might be a year older. If you were part-time or had to repeat a subject, remember that the modules in the major count towards one grouped credit structure, a 50 credit structure for the major. The focus skills are a different story, and obviously I couldn't provide you with templates for all the focus skills included in everything. I didn't want to complicate it any more than it needed to. But if you do have a focus skill, use the base template and then duplicate the elements in here. You know, you can just grab the placeholder, grab the title, and simply duplicate it by pressing, I think, Control, what was that? Shift D, Control D, Control D, and then you can use trying to think what the shortcut is again. That's not the one. Or just drag it down, just so that they're aligned. The main thing is that it doesn't really matter where you place these, as long as you keep them in this sort of vertical sequence. So even if you've managed to kind of like drag these out to some other point where they're starting to overlap, that's fine. Continue with your edit, because at any point in time, you can just go and select all the layers all at once and say keyframe assistant sequence layers. It'll pop up with this little window asking you whether they should overlap, and you can just say, no, it's fine, just keep it as is. And then you've resequenced all your layers. So as long as you keep the vertical sequence intact, you shouldn't have any problems with adding any new titles. Stick to the convention. So if you had any other modules that you wish to include here, you're welcome to do so. If you were a double major, you can have them both in here. I would recommend, though, splitting the subjects. So if you're double majoring, you might have two different panels for whatever other subjects you have. So I think don't integrate like your modules over here. Rather, download the other template. It's easy enough to grab any one of these templates. Where are we? So any one of these other templates. So if you're double majoring, we've got, what are we working on? Game design, no, we're working on 3D animation. We can just drag the entire 3D animation template, game design template in here, and we would just need to open that composition. You can render that. So you can do everything in one sitting. Okay, so with the 3D, I think you should be able to just quickly jump through all of these. You'll see you've got all your subjects in there: visual development, 3D visualization, with the multiple submissions, and then your work. Now, because we're already titling every single piece of work, there's really no need for additional titles. If you wanted to specify whatever you've worked on, if there's other people that need to be credited, you can include it in the titles over here, or rather specify what needs to be credited, so what you worked on specifically. So if it's pre-visualization, but you only did the edit, or you've only done I don't know, the color grade or the audio or whatever, you could just specify what you worked on, and then we can look at that. You could also end it with some credits if you wanted to. You're welcome to add to this, but again, consider the design elements that this is already set up with. So don't go and introduce new textures, don't go and introduce new texts or fonts rather. We're very easily distracted by things that are misplaced. And it's not the panel's problem, it's a human condition. When you see something moving or something flickering, something popping, something off kilter, a spelling mistake, anything like that, it's an immediate blow, technically, for your marks, because not only are we distracted by it, it influences our perception of your work, because it speaks it speaks to your ability to produce professional looking presentations and produce work or present work professionally ultimately. And if there's things that's wrong with it, it kind of like, we tend to hammer on that. We tend to fixate on that rather than the work itself. So often when we see, like, I don't know, this happens way too often, but like a typo, run it by a couple of other people before coming to your portfolio presentation. If it's not included in your term already, to have like pre-viewings or pre-presentations, just show it to your peers and maybe anyone in your immediate vicinity, friends, family, to just fact check or spot check even. Just like make sure that everything is right and not out of order. Because the moment that we see something like that, we look down at our papers or screens or whatever we're assessing your work through, and we'll make a note, and we'll probably miss some of the work that was actually on point or per brief. So I think little things like spelling mistakes, edges that creep in because of misalignment, popping frames because of layers not aligning properly, those are all things that can really be avoided and really should be avoided, because you don't want that to influence your work. If you present your work, and we've looked at this in the past, and it's not explicitly in a design principle, but it's something that definitely changes the perception of your work, is timing. And if there's timing issues, the same can happen. So like things that cut too soon, editing mistakes, audio that just pops out and pops back in, or scenes that just drag on forever. Try and consolidate as much of that as possible and still maintain good design principles. So in other words, look for things in your work that could potentially stand out more than other things that you want to draw attention to. So for instance, if you were showcasing, let's say, a couple of elements on here, I'm just going to drag some content in here quick. So, and then if I drag it in, I'm just going to place it in its position. And then luckily with the way that's actually, no, not all that lucky. These placeholders could serve as markers for you to snap to. So there's this neat little shortcut or two, and the combination of in After Effects. If you want to jump to the in point, you press I. If you want to jump to the out point of any clip, you press O. And if you jump to the in point of a clip and you want to align the other clip to it, you can select that and press square bracket. And then that would, so the left square bracket would jump the in point to the marker, and the right square bracket would jump the out point to the marker. So that's a very quick way of editing footage in After Effects. Like I said before, if you prefer editing in anything else, I think you can just export these, not mistaken, as layers. So let me just quickly check this because I didn't actually test it. And I've also forgotten where to do that, apparently. I think it's over here, layer. Sorry, it's in composition. Save frame as Photoshop layers. Let's just double check. Student portfolio. So you'll have to do this a couple of times, of course, or drag out all your layers at once. It makes things a bit tricky. So I'm just going to go for, like 01. Save this, and obviously, since the font is installed, it shouldn't really be a problem. Okay, cool. So it flattens it and everything in any case. So that's not an issue. And then you can probably just save these out as multiple layers and bring them all in together. So if we had to do another one, so we just go over here, and then I don't know if it needs to be selected. Save frame as Photoshop layers. You could specify a file, I guess. It doesn't have to be a PSD. If you went, although then it kind of like wants to render it, which is a bit painful. So I think this is just the easiest. So this is my second one, Visual Development 2. So I'll just save this as number 2. And I had some overlapping layers there, which doesn't seem to be too much of an issue. Copy, paste, I think. Control F. No, that's not it. Control Shift V. What's paste in place? Edit, paste in place. That's supposed to be correct. Okay, and then you can obviously save out each one of these images or layers. I think you can do that in batch as well. Save them out as PNGs or something like that, and then drop them into your edit if you don't feel like editing in After Effects. Okay. So let's say in some instances you may want to show like before and after. Again, use a grid system. Go show guides. Okay, so those are the guides that were in place before. Probably need to go and show rulers as well. Let's see, show Show rulers. You can, no, sorry, mistaken it for Photoshop. You can't really set, I don't think you can set that to percentage or pixels, or at least I don't know how. There might be a setting, but you should probably just look at the pixels that you're using, typical grid system then again, and you can go and draw a grid and bring it in as well. There might be a grid view, show grid, but then you're going to have to go and specify what those grid iterations are, because this is not particularly useful. 1920 would be 960. So if we do go to, let's see, where's 960? You can do this. So that's what, that's 10, 1, 2, 3. That should be your middle. And you also have these guides down here for title and action safe, and there I pretty much got it on the middle. So that's our, I mean, these guides are kind of useful because they, down here, because they, well, there's the shortcuts for guides and rulers in any case. That's a better grid. Okay, so once you have some guides in place, you can address things like relationships between elements. You can address the balance and alignment. So I would then structure my work so that it fits into this. So if there was a before and after, like I mentioned, or a development process that took multiple steps, then perhaps you can break it into 3 or 4, but segments that are balanced. Try and avoid having anything. So if we were to, let's say, do this layout, and we have, you know, the background sticking out or whatever, try and avoid creating very obvious borders and breaks between things, and also try and avoid like this amount of contrast with your work, because the moment that you're and it so often happens that you display like some of your sketches like on white backgrounds, but then you have a frame, like a scan that you've made, you've got a frame with the sketch in it, and then you've got another frame of color because that's the color of your composition. So try and have your color of your composition blend into your work as much as possible so that we don't experience additional contrast when looking at it. You'll very quickly see that things with or creating this sort of artificial contrast, it actually reduces the amount of contrast in your work. So it makes it harder to see what's going on in your work because you've created this additional layer of contrast. In those instances, of course, you know, you would need to remove any of these. This is already better because now the only contrast in the frame is actually the contrast that's coming from the work itself. So I'm just gonna switch off that thing because it's a little bit in my way. Now we've kind of like messed up our balance because we've got this one element that we want to show, but we don't have anything else. And then sometimes what also happens is you have, I know the game developers sometimes have this issue where you have vertical content. So for your mobile development and things like that, I'll show you how to fix that in a second. I'm just going to quickly try and get something else in here that is similar but also different. I think there might be a earlier edition of this. Okay, so now we have like animatic phase and rendered phase. We want them both there at the same time. Look out for these sneaky little ones. If even if your components didn't have audio, there might be audio rendered on it, and they often get a bit messed up if you tend to move things around and overlaying them or putting them together. So I think for most parts, unless the element itself requires audio, I would switch that off, and I would have a guide track or some audio track in the background. It's also fairly easy to fade audio in and out. So if we were, I don't know, let's see if we've got anything in here. Probably have an audio track in here somewhere. Somewhere. Okay, I'm just going to use anything for now. Let's say this was my audio track. Drop that all the way to the bottom. Excuse me. I like viewing the waveform because it gives me a good indication of the levels in any case. If it's too loud, obviously test it, play it, see what, you know, what it's doing and whether it and how it compares to other renders that you've done. You kind of want all the peaks and valleys to like look the same across the board. So this seems awfully loud because it kind of comes all the way up to the max. I would maybe just dumb that down a little bit. And also that's how you would essentially fade things in and out. So if you had to fade the audio in from, I don't know, let's see, 20, it was 40 frames, 50 frames, which is essentially like 2 seconds. You'll see that if you fade it out, it actually shows you on the audio wave there as well what it's doing. Okay, so now the audio would fade in, but try and see and match audio to edit points. So if you're going to change the entire mood, or if it's a term change or something like that, do try and change the audio out. Don't just have one track serve your entire portfolio, especially if it repeats or if it's a very repetitive tune. Also, don't try and make it too obvious. It should just be ambience. And if the element itself requires audio, then of course you'd need to fade out the underlying audio. Once again, things that you'd most likely pick up by simply previewing it before you submit it for presentation. Okay, so that's the little audio snippet. But if we're going on to elements once again, we have 2 renders at 2 different scales here. You need to figure out balance. So in this instance, it might become tricky to display both at the same time. We don't want to scale elements up because that breaks the resolution. But sometimes, and I really wouldn't recommend this when quality is an issue, but something like a animatic doesn't really have inherent quality. Like there are things, and sometimes sketches and things like that come in at a higher resolution as well. You can probably afford to scale something like 10% of its original. Anything after that will start showing. There are tools and add-ons and AI algorithms and things that allow you to scale your footage more, but I really wouldn't venture there. In this instance now, we need to kind of find a happy middle ground for the 2 elements that we're showing because they're not covering the entire screen. We can't have them overlap on the text, of course. We kind of want to have the text finish before we drop into our content. So once again, jump to the out point of that. I'm actually going to go to the next frame. Wait, where are we? So is this, sorry, I'm just switching off my audio as visual because that was causing some confusion. Let's jump to the endpoint over there. Okay, we still have a sort of size discrepancy. That one's sticking out. That one's not quite in. You want to avoid like edges and little artifacts wherever you can as well. So try and figure out what the best layout is for your work. Again, now I'm going over that 10%. But you can expect to see breakup like starting to occur. Might be a bit much. Don't know what random resolution that thing was rendered at. But for balance, I would most likely want to scale down the other element so that they match. Maybe just half phrase, I think that was what that was. Okay, so that dark blue layer over here, that actually needs to go through the entire sequence, but I think since I've sequenced them, I might have moved it. Placed it back now. It's also the background color, I believe, but or the composition color, but it will actually only render black if you don't have that solid at the bottom. So do, once again, just pay attention to that. So I think in this instance, these two frames kind of, they work where they are. They're somewhat balanced. They're not, there's still some space between this element and that one. We may want to just check how that fits onto the grid, because that would be the correct height for it then. So we could potentially afford to move that up, get back onto the grid, since that tends to fall on. I mean, it's not a perfect grid for this in any case, but it does give us some form of structure to the frame. So maybe that's, I think, a lot better. And if we just remove all our overlays real quick. And not accidentally move things and cut them out of the scene, then that's a perfect way to display maybe progress over time. It does feel a bit off without the title there. And we have quite a bit of popping. So nothing is aligning. Make sure that, once again, layers align. Okay. You can, of course, decide on whenever these things need to end. If the work is longer than the prescribed duration over there, I think each one of these, let me just see what are they. They're 10 seconds each, which is actually quite a bit of time to hold someone's attention. So if your clips start getting longer than that, especially if you're only displaying images or like concept work, then I think you're definitely lingering too long. Typically titles, so I think I'm not sure what the duration of that title is. Let me just check. Typically titles shouldn't be more than 3 seconds or 4 seconds for that matter. These tend to be just 2.5, and the main title is 5. So try and stick to that format. When it comes to text and images, I would also say don't keep an image on screen for more than 5 seconds. In animation, we typically tend to go for 3 or 4, less than 5. But again, anything more than that, you're probably lingering on something for too long. Okay. I don't know if you can just select. There's a lot of things in After Effects that I use often, and then there's a lot of things that I don't actually get to use at all. So I don't know if you can. I guess you can select the label group. Cool. That was pretty that was a good guess, really. And then you can switch off all these placeholders at once, because they are they're marked, or those module ones are at least marked. And then if you want to do the same for here, you can once again say, what is it? Oops, I changed that one. It was supposed to be select label group, and once again you can toggle all of those off at the same time. There's a sorry. Okay, and let me just wrap this up. We carry on with this too long. Cool. So we've got a portion where we're showing visual development. This is not mood boards, but it might have been something like, I don't know, animation, pre-visualization, where you can show elements like this. You can, of course, use the whole frame. You could pack 4 of these in here, if you have a lot of turnarounds. Perhaps you could even crop some of these. Vertical shots. So let's say this was an app, for example. There is something where you can sort of try and alleviate. No, it's a bit of a trick. Let's do that. Let's grab this one and pretend it was vertical. Okay. So then you'd probably want that to fit the frame. And I'm sure there's probably a scale to fit here somewhere as well. Fit to comp height. That did not do it at all. But there's something that could make that easier. Once again, just have some guides in place. So I'd like to make sure that that is at least centered. I think find the right scale so that everything fits. You're not chopping off anything from your work. And then there's, I mean, that's one way of displaying it, and that's probably fine, but we are seeing a lot of blacks, like black empty space, or well, dark canvas in any case, which may cause your application to display differently. Because if you're doing something like, let's say, that had a lot of white on screen, we're sitting with an awful lot of contrast. So a way to, and I wouldn't recommend it for everything, but where you have all of this white space and you're inadvertently creating additional contrast for your work, you may want to double that work up in a way that we sometimes do. So you take the bottom layer and then you just go and ramp that up. And remember, of course, because we're scaling things, we're losing a lot of quality. So we need to manage that. This one I see is just not aligning properly. So I'm just going to, I want to reset the position, but not the rotation. Okay. So yeah, I think anything smaller than that, or maybe I didn't quite reset the position. Either way. So for this background, to manage the breakup that we're seeing in the bottom layer, we could go something like effects, blur, fast blur, that should do fine. Something like, I don't know, 10 pixels or so. And what you could also do is just a bit of brightness and contrast to reduce that as well. So we'll typically say like -10 contrast, -10 brightness. Maybe even more. This is a very colorful scene though. And because we don't really, I mean, because we've just flipped it on its side, we don't really have any focal point. So it seems awfully noisy. If it's not working, I mean, use it at your discretion, of course. If it's not working, then don't use it. But I think for a lot of mobile apps, this is a good way of just getting a little bit more into the content and maybe appreciating that a little bit more. Okay, I think we can leave it at that. If you have any issues or queries about the template, you're welcome to obviously ask, and we can discuss it again. I'll relay all of this information to the major subject managers so that they know like what you have at your disposal. You really shouldn't be using your own templates, and we can maybe have a quick look at why. Okay, last thing, I think I did mention, if you want to duplicate any of these titles, you're welcome to do so. Just make sure that your additional work and your showreel features at the end and not sooner. And your main modules and major should be first, and any additional focus skills should be thereafter. Okay, if you have multiple majors, you can, I guess you can stitch them together, but I think that you might run into issues with submissions. So keep them separate for now, and maybe just include your focus skill in the major presentation where it's most pertinent. It's always useful to know when students are double majoring though, because like I said before, it really gives us an impression, an overall impression of your efficacy, your work ethic, your time management skills, all of those things that are important to the assessors to know whether or not you're going to cope in the industry. So please do make your evaluation panel aware of any other subjects or things that you do. Even if you're working, like if you're already employed somewhere, it's useful to know. It might just be a little like bit in your showreel or a section under your additional work where you can bring it up. We also have live presentations, so you have the ability to chip in and discuss things. But try and have the work speak for itself, because most students whenever they say something, it's probably not in aid of their portfolio. It normally starts off with like, I'm sorry that this isn't there, or that this isn't like, that's the worst way to start a presentation, is by apologizing. So try to avoid shedding any negative light on your presentation. Just let the panel experience it for what it is. And if there's any questions, or if there's important information that you feel is necessary for them to know, because it sketches your work in a better light, then of course you can intervene, you can discuss things, but don't apologize, or keep your apologies for the end.
May I say something, please?
Yes, sure.
From an old lecturer friend back when I was studying in Tux, we also had to do these types of presentations, and something he told me that I will never forget is never, or rather, he says, if you fail, get so into that failure that you make it look like you did the right thing and everyone else is wrong. So,
what?
so basically, he says, don't apologize, just make it look like you did it so well, or basically, and to be honest, it was 3 years ago, so it's hard, but basically just said, it comes down to don't focus on the negatives, focus on how that mistake made so many positives that it was worth making.
Yeah, what you learned, what you took away from it, sure, own it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no point in sort of trying to make excuses for things that have passed, or past terms. If there's actual issues, then it's best to address them afterwards. So maybe just tell your, or rather, even better, if you can address them beforehand. If you've maybe at some point failed a term, or did not submit something, and there's now gaps in your portfolio, and you want to know how to address that, rather find out now, like how you can maybe supplement your portfolio, or figure out what you can place there, so that you don't get like penalized for it again. Like, you don't want to suffer the penalty for the work that you didn't do in the term, and then have to suffer that same penalty for your portfolio. So find out from your lecturers what you can do to fix those gaps in your portfolio, so that your portfolio is complete, or at least it appears complete when you present it, because an incomplete portfolio is also really like bad news for a presentation, because then we just take whatever mark you had and divide it by the amount of projects that you missed, your percentage of projects that you missed. So that's quite detrimental. We expect a certain amount of work to be in the portfolio, and if there's anything missing, then that really affects your marks. I'm gonna try. So my idea was, or initial idea was, to show you some portfolios where the templates and the design of the elements, surrounding elements, didn't quite fit and didn't work well. Obviously, that's a bit of a problem, because I don't want to make any of the past students, whether they passed or fail, look bad. And I once again, I just went back a couple of years. I don't think this is 2019. I think this is more like 2016. Might have just moved in 2019 or 18 or whenever. So that's not. So they are quite dated, and I don't think anyone that's listed here is still studying necessarily. But let's quickly have a look. Okay, so typically we would have showreels as separate elements in the past, and remember, these don't use any templates, so, or didn't at least have templates available to them, unless they had motion design. We're trying to standardize that now. I remember Erin was quite technically inclined, and I'm just like taking shots in the dark now. So there seems to be a template in place here. There's no audio up until this point. Walls of text typically don't do so well. And again, there's that issue where that text was on screen for like quite some time. Remember, you don't necessarily need to pause for the entire duration of the text, or rather not pause in the presentation, but pause the presentation itself, if that makes sense. Keep your text on there for 5 seconds. Don't keep it there for longer. If someone wants to read, they can go back, pause the frame, and then read it. So don't stretch out the duration of your portfolio presentation just because you have a lot of text on screen. Try not to do this at all, though. If it's the same asset, but different elements of detail, it would make way more sense having a single panel with the different elements laid out on that. This is a bit strange that we have this massive black frame around the content. Even though this is an animatic, it would have been very easy to maybe alleviate some of that contrast. It doesn't really make sense to me that things are at different resolutions. Everything should technically be full HD. Also, try and avoid showing multiple iterations of the same thing. So if you did different animation passes, try and lay them all out on a single panel. Maybe split it into 4 so you show the different passes, and maybe have the last pass or the most complete element as a full frame element. I don't really understand why there's this resolution difference, but I think I've seen enough. Erin's work or portfolio wasn't that bad. There was a template in place at least. If you can, from any of your other elements that you're presenting, where the text isn't absolutely necessary, where it doesn't have, like, don't introduce new layers of text and descriptions unless it's absolutely essential or if it's already part of the work itself. Only stick to the text in the template, and like I mentioned, if you have to add credits, you can add it there. Try not to clutter your work. We like using student work for us, well, show reels, and we can't use any of your work if you keep on like adding. I mean, we might find ways and we can mask it out, but typically we prefer your work to just be in its raw format. Okay, do 1 or 2 more of these, and then we can break or depart rather. There are some good ones in here as well. I remember Megan was quite a keen concept artist, although now I have to remember which Megan. Maybe both. Brandon's, I don't know if I showed you this last time. He had quite an impressive showreel or portfolio.
Sorry to interrupt. Something is strange about the audio.
Is it playing or not playing?
It's playing, but it sounds like it's coming from your mic instead of the
It would probably, because I'm
tab.
sharing the screen. It's not, I don't think it's super important, the audio itself.
Okay, sorry for interrupting then.
I can mute it as well, but I think his timing, look, the difference between perhaps this portfolio and the previous one is that Brandon had some inherent design sensibility. So he produced a good portfolio because he was sensitive to how the information and the content itself is being presented. And it might be a tall ask for everyone to have that sensibility, because we are in different mediums and we're specializing in different things, and you can't expect the same from a game developer as you do from a motion designer with like communication design as their secondary major. So there's quite a large spectrum of design experience, and we're trying to really get rid of that essentially, because we're not assessing we're not supposed to be assessing, let me rephrase, because we are assessing the way that you're presenting your work to some extent, but that shouldn't be the main deciding factor, and it shouldn't have such a massive impact on the work that you're presenting that it changes what you've had up to that point by more than 10%. So you should already kind of have, based on your year average, a clue as to where your portfolio is going to end up when it's being assessed. It would be very strange unless you like completely muck up the portfolio presentation, or you don't pitch, that your portfolio would deviate more than 10% from your year mark. There are fringe cases, however, where people put in a lot of extra work, where they have like an entirely like additional portfolio, like a concept art portfolio, where it has happened that you get better marks. But it would be very strange for you to have like way worse marks than what you've received throughout the year. See, and this is a good example of a rig demo where you try and speed up things as much as possible. You don't want to linger too long. You can of course edit elements so you don't have to have it all as one shot. Okay, so Brandon's is a little bit of a fringe case where he understood design and still managed to do a fairly good portfolio. But I think maybe one of these concept artists are going to step into the trap of creating, let me see, overly decorative themes. Let me just check. Okay, this also seems quite muted in terms of design. Sorry, I'm trying to find worse examples. Tyrone. Yeah, well, there's so Tyrone kicks off with his game presentation. This is a terrible start to a presentation. This text is massive. There's no sorry, Tyrone, but there's no spacing. There's no white space. There's no everything is centered. This font, if it is a font, is quite hideous. If you have elements like that, I guess it's okay, but perhaps you could block it out. Design is probably not Tyrone's best skill. It's nice that the work eventually features at full frame. Just going to quickly jump away from this. There was another one that I remember. You might see some of your lecture or some of the lecture portfolios here. I spotted Tienis's earlier, and there's a Rickus there as well. Game menus. Okay, yeah, so spelling mistakes. Definitely not. Also, this this thing, and we've had pretty like it happens a lot. Rather, let's put it that way, where you try and incorporate some form of humor into your presentation by having these kind of like cue cards, if you will, or title pages to explain things. Again, try and avoid that. Portfolio needs to be as clean and clear cut as possible. Any deviation from that risks like affecting your marks in a negative way. So just stick to the work that you've done. I'll do one more, and then we'll break for Q&A, and then after that we could disperse. Let's see. I was looking for the example of the turnaround of the icosphere that I spoke about, but I haven't managed to track that down yet. That was the winner. Okay, so this isn't that bad, but students often want to use themes or theme their presentations, which again, that sets a different tone altogether. So now everything kind of has this this design element, this additional design element that's on top of the existing work, and it has the ability to either make or break your presentation. So it's really better to completely alleviate or completely move those things, set them apart. Like don't associate new context with your existing work by adding themes. Keep it clean. Lauren did a good job presenting her references and her storyboards together. I haven't picked up an example of it yet, but often when you have your work on screen, just make sure that it actually aligns and covers all the edges, because if there's a little bleeding black rim or something like that, it's also distracting. So just try and keep it professional. I think that's the main point I'm trying to make. Clean, professional, use the templates, adapt the template to work for your work, use the titles that we provided, and then build on top of that. The template already follows good design principles like emphasis, contrast, space, repetition, and alignment. So just build on those components. Cool. Yes, you can improve your marks by working on old work and improving that. You may have to point out that that is actually improved work. So I would say in an instance where you have a defined number of assessment outcomes, like let's say in this one, we've listed like pre-visualization is one of the submissions, and then I think there's, wait, that was pre-visualization and treatment. So there's 2 submissions for that. If you redid any one of those, then I would simply change that text. So you duplicate both, move them into their vertical hierarchy. Now just watch out for the overlapping elements that might start interfering or maybe just causing some havoc there. You can just move it further along to see what you're doing. And then I would just, that's not what I'm trying to do, but it's probably because I've just got more than one layer selected. Then I would say in that instance, still say treatment, but maybe just add the word reworked or improved. And I think this goes for any resubmissions. So then you would just say, so if it was an actual resubmission, then you would just say resubmission over here. Yes.
So I just wanted to like ask, like I've done like the portfolios for like it was, I'm, for Motion9, sorry, and we never had to mention that we improved upon the work or anything like that. It was actually expected that we should work on our work and improve it. So I'm a bit confused now because I didn't then mention what I improved in my old portfolios then.
I'm trying to think. Look, I think it's important when the panel has access to your previous marks to show or to say that you've improved it from that point, because if it's, unless you've like kind of reworked everything, worked on everything and made it better. But if you're expecting someone to take be cognizant of the fact that you've reworked something and that the marks need to vary from what they were originally, then I think it's worth pointing out. If it's not something that you want to, like, let's say, I'm just thinking, like you're not necessarily then expected, like with a resub, you have to show the previous work and the improved work so that we can understand why you had to resub in the first place. But if you're just improving on the work and you're already getting the benefit of the improved work through the portfolio, then maybe it doesn't explicitly need to be stated that you've improved it, if that makes sense, because you are benefiting from the improved work in any case. But if you feel that there's so much that has changed since the original, then I think it's worth pointing out, because it might happen that maybe someone improved on something, but they didn't actually improve it. So you think that you might have improved it, but then you actually, like, I don't know, broke something or changed the color in a way that like makes it less appealing. Then at least we still have the previous work to base our assessment on and be like, okay, you know what, this is not actually a better version of the previous version, but kudos to you for going back and like attempting it. So maybe there's a gray area there where you don't absolutely have to say that you've reworked something, but if you want someone, or if you want additional feedback on that, then do say. But in the case of a resubmission, you absolutely have to. I don't know, does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, please go and have a look at those templates, download them, see if they work for you. Let me know if there's anything that you want updated or changed, or if you have any questions then. Yeah, I'm available. And have a good week, and we'll see each other next week. Scott. And Angela. Scott first.
Angela can go first. I have a long thing I want to talk to you about.
All right, Angela.
Cool. I just wanted to ask, if we like redo an entire terms project, should we mention that in the portfolio?
I think especially if it wasn't done under supervision, if you know what I mean. Like if you've done that on your own accord, then I think you should tell us that you've done it, that you've reworked it. If it's part of something that you already do in your major, then maybe it's not as important, because the lecturer will be in the panel in any case and will explain the process to us. But if you're showing us the work, and if no one in the panel knows where it comes from, I think absolutely, let us know, help us understand where this work originated from and why you chose to rework it, because we'll probably have questions about the reworking of the work in any case.
Okay, cool. Now that answers my question. Thank you.
Cool. Scott?
I don't know if Justin has a long one also, because...
Okay, Justin. So Scott is the eventual hand up. Okay.
Anyone with shorter answers can go before me.
So this might have been already been answered. I'm just having a lot of noise on my side, so I might have missed it. So the reason why I asked the question, because you were saying now before, only if you've resubmitted work do you show the old and the new work. But let's say I've gotten, let's say, my average around about 60. And I know that if I submit what I've gotten overall as my term, that's about what I'm basing on my end portfolio mark, but I want to increase that by 5%. So would I just show the work in progress and then the improved work? Or do I have to show the work in or how I designed the work, or how I started the creation of the work, then what I submitted for the term hand-in, and then the improved work? I just want to know if I must add the improved or not, or I mean, show that it, or label that it's been improved, or just show the work in process and then improved.
I think, okay, so one of the things that's easy is that whatever you submitted during the term absolutely has to be in your portfolio. So you can't leave things out because you weren't happy with the way that they were presented in the in the term. So if you submitted work for the term, it needs to be in the portfolio. And then if you rework that, then I would just show the improved version directly after that, and then label it as improved, so that we can understand where it comes from. But like I said, if it's an ongoing thing and you've improved everything, but it's not like massively significant, then we will get the sense that the work has been reworked. Or you can even just have a statement at the end saying that work for terms 3 and 4 was redone, or something like that. Could be short and sweet. But you absolutely have to have the original work in there.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. That answers my question.
Cool. Jessica?
Just a quick question. So I've I fixed the eyeballs and updated the drivers and stuff for the giraffe rig. I just wanted to check with you because it kind of looks like, I'm not sure if it's the most updated mesh, But also, I just wanted to check with the arms, because the way that the arms and the legs are on the giraffe versus the hippo are different. Like on the giraffe, the arms and the body are all the same mesh, whereas with the hippo, the arms and legs are physically different meshes, but they've all been joined into one object, if that makes sense. So I
Mhm.
don't know if I must also do that with the giraffe.
No, it makes no difference to the way that it's animated or rendered in the end. So, no, that's fine. They'll follow the rig.
Just leave it as normal.
Yeah, that's fine.
Or one mesh. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Angela, do you have another question? Is your hand's just still up?
No, sorry, hand is still up.
Cool. Scott.
Okay. So I'm generally confused about the 3D file structure, and I just wanted to double check with you if I'm doing it right. Where is
Okay.
it? So
Right. I think so. Just while we're at it, I think this is very 3D specific, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if no one else has any questions about the portfolios, you're welcome to leave. Okay, let's go, Scott.
So we gave our files to Chris, right? Like that was step one, and he put it on the server. So it's there. So now what I want to understand is like we copy that file structure, like we remake it. Yes? No. Okay, then
You
that's
don't
pretty wrong.
you don't have to copy that file structure. You just have to make sure that the assets that you're responsible for is and stays similar to the ones that we have in the main branch, if you will. Because those are the only elements that you will take out and work on and replace. So you don't have to take the entire project folder. You're welcome to, of course. It will probably be quite chunky. But you only take what you need from that project.
Okay, so here's the next
essentially it's like a trying to find to create a metaphor that works. It's like having all our eggs in one basket now, but you're still responsible for decorating those eggs. So what you would typically do is you take one egg out, you work on it, you paint it, and you put it back in the basket. You can take the whole basket, or copy the whole basket, but then you're still going to have to put the eggs back where they belong.
Yeah, I was gonna ask because the whole basket isn't there. Like the link takes you to a bunch of files, but like me and Jared uploaded our stuff and our stuff isn't on there. So I was like, do we work on our own files and then in week 4 we bring those ones and then update those?
I think that the file, I don't know if those are, or the one on campus is like accessible yet. Like, I don't know if you can access it from anywhere else except from.
No, we can't.
On campus. So that's one of the things that we still plan on fixing. And then that library will obviously still be supplemented and finalized. So it's still a work in progress structure. So I guess to answer your question, yes, continue working in your individual scenes, but keep in mind that the assets that you're exporting or extracting from those scenes have certain requirements in terms of their naming and where they fit into other scenes.
So we don't change the names or anything. We can just change the locations to match the file structure example on Miro. But as long as we don't change the names, then it should be good.
It should be good. And then I think we're still going to run into issues where we do have to change names and update names and things until we have a final structure. So hopefully we'll be there.
Okay, cool. Because I was scared to work on my file because I thought I was supposed to download the campus file. But yeah,
It should be fine as long as you keep track of what you're working on, what you've updated, because those will have to be re-exported as assets.
all right, cool. So I'm not completely off track.
No,
Nice.
I think everything's still fine. There's still time.
Okay,
We
super.
did.
Thanks.
I don't know if you've heard, but we did deviate a little bit from our animation brief schedule. We were supposed to do simulations this week, but we decided to skip right ahead to the animation reviews. Most of you were working on animation sequences. So if you can, at this point, prioritize animation, then we can maybe wrap up animation this week already, at least most of the key sequences. But I think most of you are already working on animation in any case. Or something similar. Or your animation was at a stage where it didn't really require any more work. But that's, yeah, I mean, more on that on Thursday, of course.
All right, cool.
Cool. If that's everyone, I bid you adieu. Thanks. Thank you.